Welcome to another episode of Undercard Heroes. My name is Francisco.
And I'm Heather.
And we've got a very early fight card for you this weekend. Zhang Mingyang versus Johnny Walker in Shanghai. This is going to be an early one, 3 a.m. Eastern Time start. But I will be waking up to watch 3 fights, and we'll talk about it in this video.
Let's get into it. So tell us about this first pick.
First fight I want to talk about, Sergei Pavlovich versus Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Now, I'm looking for a vintage Pavlovich performance here. He's got 7 first-round KOs in the UFC, and I think that, we haven't really seen that version of Pavlovich in a while, but I believe this will be his return to form, and he's going to get the KO finish over Waldo Cortes-Acosta, so I'm going Pavlovich by KO at plus 110 odds.
So what makes you think that we might see that vintage Pavlovich for this fight?
Well, to be honest, I think this is a bit of a step down in competition for Pavlovich. If you take a look at some of his past performances, he's got KO finishes over Derek Lewis, the king of KOs, Tai Tuivasa, Curtis Blades. Then he gets KO'd by the current champ, Tom Aspinall, and something changed after that. He hasn't really quite looked the same. He fought Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Alexander Volkov. Both of them have that knockout power, and so he may have been just a little apprehensive. That's not something I think he's going to get from Waldo Cortes-Acosta. I don't think Cortes-Acosta has that level of knockout power, and Pavlovich, I think, is just a much better fighter. He's got great striking, can be very explosive, and I think he gets the KO here.
What about Waldo here? What might his strategy be?
Waldo Cortes-Acosta, he's 7-1 in the UFC, and for him, I think the best fight to sort of compare this one to is his fight against Robelis Despain. Despain, bronze medalist in Taekwondo, came into the UFC, ton of hype, really big guy, had a height and range advantage over Waldo Cortes-Acosta, and he got tagged a couple times early, but ultimately he pressured forward, took him to the ground. Obviously, very different fighter here. Robelis Despain had 0 ground game. That's not going to be the case with Pavlovich, but I think that that's probably going to be his best path to victory here. Maybe try and land some takedowns. Waldo Cortes-Acosta is really a point fighter, so he's going to be, trying to hit him with his jabs, come in, come out. He grinds out decisions mostly, so that's probably going to be his best path to victory. But honestly, this is just a huge step up for Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Pavlovich has a 75% takedown defense, so I don't see him landing very many takedowns on him. And, there was a point where we wanted Pavlovich to fight John Jones. So just a huge disparity in talent here, I think.
Well, let's see if we're gonna really see that vintage Pavlovich. So tell us about this next fight. It sounds like there's been an update.
Yes, this next fight, Aljamain Sterling versus Brian Ortega. This was originally planned to be a featherweight fight, but is now going to be a catchweight instead.
What does that mean? I've never heard catchweight before.
So at featherweight, 145, catchweight now, Brian Ortega couldn't make the weight, so it's going to be fought at 153 pounds instead. So just, not featherweight, not lightweight, this kind of middle ground, 153.
Interesting. Does that give one of them an advantage?
Yes, I think this changes the fight a little bit. Honestly, I think it gives Brian Ortega a little bit of advantage because I think Aljamain Sterling would have hit that 145-pound limit. Brian Ortega being spotted these extra pounds. Even though Aljamain Sterling also weighed in 153, I'm just going to assume Brian Ortega is going to look a little bit bigger in this fight, and that could definitely give him an advantage. But I'm going to go with Aljamain Sterling to win this fight by either submission or decision. That's still a favorite at minus 245. But I just think, Brian Ortega has fantastic ground game. He's got very slick submissions, but Aljamain Sterling, I think, just has the better takedowns than Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega is more, reactive on the ground. And Aljamain Sterling also, he's constantly competing in these grappling tournaments outside of the UFC. So He's constantly sharpening that tool, and he looked fantastic in the Movsar-Evloev fight. So I think that, he gets to the ground. I think Aljamain Sterling ultimately, it's going to be really hard to finish Brian Ortega. He's only been finished twice, once by Max Holloway, another by Yair. So this will be a really interesting match, but I'm going to give it to Aljamain Sterling by submission or decision.
So what about Brian Ortega? What might his path to victory be?
Sneaky chance here for Brian Ortega is going to be in the stand-up. Like I said, he's got really slick grappling, but he's got some really good boxing skills too. I mean, you saw it in the fight against Yair and against Diego Lopez. He landed some really clean shots on them in the stand-up, and I think that he can really surprise Aljamain Sterling here on the feet, who has been caught, standing before he got dropped by Sean O'Malley. So that's where I think that Brian Ortega could really pose a threat to Aljamain Sterling, is in the stand-up. And like I said, he can always get a submission win too. He's got very slick jiu-jitsu.
Well, it sounds like this is going to be a really interesting catchweight fight. So for this last fight, it sounds like you have a pretty bold claim.
Yes, this is our main event here, Zhang Mingyang versus Johnny Walker. And, we've talked about Zhang Mingyang in previous videos, and I think we're going to see same thing that we predicted last time in the Anthony Smith fight. First round KO for Zhang Mingyang.
So what makes you think that?
Well, he is fighting in his home country here, Zhang Mingyang, this one being in Shanghai, China. And he's got 12 first round KOs. He's got almost 11 significant strikes landed per minute. Wow. He absorbs just a little under 4, or a little over 4.5, which is massive. That is a huge, huge striking differential. I have not seen anything like that. And Johnny Walker, I love Johnny Walker. I think he's a great fighter. I love watching them. He could have very easily reshaped this whole division. In his fight against Magomed Ankalaev, he faked a liver shot, and then he did a sneaky flying knee that just barely missed, and had it landed, it would have reshaped everything. But he's now on a 2-fight losing streak, some pretty bad KOs. Previous to that, he had beaten Anthony Smith, Paul Craig, Ian Kuntalaba, but then got knocked out by Jamal Hill before that. So, like I said, I like Johnny Walker a lot. I really do not think he's going to win this fight. I think he's being fed to the wolves here, in a sense. I think that this Shanghai audience demands blood, and I think they're going to see it in this one. I think that they're going to get that first round KO finish. Zhang Mingyang he's a real big prospect in this division, and with a fantastic performance here, with a KO performance over Johnny Walker, it could really propel him into that next level of superstardom here.
Ooh, well, let's see if it ends in that first round KO. That's exciting.
Thanks for watching this episode of Undercard Heroes.
So what do you think about Francisco's picks? Is there anything we missed? Is there anything that you disagree with? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Thanks, everyone.